there's a lot of people out there that are listening that have, chronic complex medical illness, or they've been sick for a long time and they have brain fog, and every day is a challenge, or most days are a challenge. And that's where Methylene Blue can really shine.
Methylene Blue has been getting a lot of airtime these days, and it's from people who are saying it's extremely dangerous. So today I wanted to talk with my friend, Dr. Scott, about what's behind these studies. Why are people saying that this is a dangerous intervention? Is it actually safe? Are there risks? Are there downsides? So I hope you'll enjoy today's episode with Dr. Scott. Of course, if you want to try his particular product, you can use code SARAH, and there will be a link down in the show notes. But I really wanted to do this episode to put this information out there, as I feel that this could potentially be a helpful and supportive intervention. But there are people who are getting it wrong. There are people who are overblowing and or misconstruing the data. So let's break all of this down in today's episode. I hope you enjoy it. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. Super excited to have Dr. Scott here with me today to talk all about Methylene Blue. Scott, thank you for being here.
Well, thanks for having me again, Sarah. It's been a few years. It's good to be back.
Yeah. I'll make sure I link the previous episode that we did in the show notes, because I still refer people to that episode as I think I called it the ultimate Methylene Blue episode, because we talked about so many things.
We did, yeah.
But yeah, I think you messaged me a few weeks ago. You're like, let's do another episode, because there's a lot of scaremongering, I guess you can call it, online going around. And I'm fielding it. I'm fielding a ton of it. I'm like, nope, I still use it. I still like it. I still recommend it. So maybe we start there, because that feels like the most relevant place to start with the whole, why are people freaking out and saying Methylene Blue is dangerous right now?
Well, I mean, like anything else, right? When it gets its day, so Methylene Blue over the last 4 or 5 months now, since January, has gotten a lot more press, gotten a lot more popular. It was spoken about on various podcasts. The viral video of RFK on an airplane putting Methylene Blue into his water was viral. It went everywhere. And then as a result of the interest in Methylene Blue over the last 3 or 4 months now, as that has come to the fore, as it gotten significantly more popular, of course, you have a lot more people coming out there trying to capitalize on the potential that this is something that's dangerous and that people shouldn't be doing, and that everybody's crazy, because that also gets lots of eyeballs and lots of clickbait everywhere for that. Yep. So it's been interesting for us as a company, and for me personally, because I've been working with Methylene Blue now for over 4 years, or 5 years at this point now, since we started working with our first commercial product back in 2020, basically. And so since that time, lots of experience with Methylene Blue, understand it a lot better even than a few years ago when we just discussed it in detail then, like the delineation between dosing and what's more of a mitochondrial optimizing dose versus what's more of a more for infection or acute trauma or like acute stress, and we can talk about all that.
Yeah.
So,
yes.
What's really interesting to me now is that more people are talking about it, and then as a result of that, we have to continue to educate, which is what I've been doing for the last 5 years with Methylene Blue. But at the same time, we have to now dispel some of the myths, some of the bunk that's out there. I don't like using the word misinformation, because that's a little politically charged, that particular term these days. But it doesn't have to be, right? But so, I mean, I can start anywhere you like. I think one of the main ones that was kind of like the first big clickbait of all this was something called the blue brain. Did you see the blue brain stuff?
Exactly where I was going to start, because that's the one people keep sending me, and they keep saying, oh, this is the dangerous substance. It's going to turn your brain blue. And I'm like, dude, the dosing on that is ridiculous. Are you kidding me? No one's taking that much Methylene Blue, right? Am I right?
Exactly right. So this was a autopsy study done on people that some of them had Methylene Blue. That's absolutely true. Some of them didn't even have Methylene Blue, but they were included in the study because whatever reason, this compound also turned things blue. And I can't remember the name of it exactly, but what they basically were looking at is a population of people that got a ridiculous amount of IV Methylene Blue as a last ditch effort to try to save their lives. It was people with septic shock, with cardiopulmonary arrest, with severe presentations, where they were giving and they were hammering them like 1 milligram per kilogram of Methylene Blue every 10, 20, or 30 minutes to try to get them. It was like their last ditch effort to keep them alive. So they did postmortems, they did autopsies on these particular individuals that were in the study, and not surprisingly, with this gigantic amount of methylene blue, so the equivalent of like around 200 to 300 milligrams IV methylene blue within a short period of time, that their brains and probably other places were blue as well. So not surprising. But from a clinical perspective, we are not using anywhere near that kind of dosing in practice. And that's where the dosing conversation can come in. We now know over the last 5 years using methylene blue is that there really is a delineation here. There's not like, it's not cut and dry. There's going to be a spectrum, of course, but in general, lower doses, 4 milligrams, 8, 16, 25 milligrams. These are all really doses. Mind you, I said milligrams, not milligrams per kilogram, right? This is just 4 milligrams, 8 milligrams, 16 milligrams. These really low doses are fantastic at optimizing mitochondrial function, at rebooting the mitochondria, at compensating for mitochondrial dysfunction, which many of us, as you know, Sarah, do have. And so this could be any of the complexes on the mitochondria that could be disrupted, especially complex 1, but complex 2 or complex 3 are also involved in a lot of different dysfunctional mechanistic aspects of what's happening in the mitochondria these days. And so methylene blue can compensate for this. It can bypass a complex that's not working very well. It can reboot a complex like complex 4 or a cytochrome oxidase that's really important, of course, on this chain of proteins to help us make energy. And so these lower doses are really great at doing that. And then higher doses, when you get to around 1 milligram per kilogram, which is around 70 milligrams, maybe a little bit lower, 50 to 70 milligrams of methylene blue, this is when you become more of an anti-infective dose. This is also when you can have, if you have more stress on the mitochondria, this can be a great dose. If you have a severe sort of autoimmune with inflammatory issues, like these higher doses can be very, very helpful overall. And they're really also great for chronic infections as well, not only acute as well as chronic as well. And so the higher doses around 50 to 70 milligrams, and then even higher than that. It can go up to some people taking up to like 200 milligrams of methylene blue per day, but that's pretty rare. Usually it's more like 50 to 100 milligrams a day is kind of like the sweet spot for more chronic infection, even acute infection, sometimes a little bit higher than that, but not for long periods of time. For severe mitochondrial dysfunction, those are the reasons why you use more of the higher dose of methylene blue. Acute trauma, acute stress, acute low oxygen states. So my patients have a higher strength methylene blue in their medicine cabinets at all times if those things happen. But in general, taking the lower doses on a regular basis or on a whatever basis that you require it, depending on the situation, is really what is going to be most helpful for most people.
Just for reference sake, the Troches, because that's the methylene blue I use. I use the Just Blue. The other carnitine, that just tweaks me out too much.
Well, it's a stimulant. Fun. It has, it's got some stimulants in there. Yeah.
It's a fun ride, but for regular dose, I'll do a full troche. So how many milligrams is that, just in the comparable to what we've been talking about in the conversation?
Yeah, so I base everything by the troches because that's how I dose it myself. That's how Transcriptions makes them. And so one full troche of Just Blue is 16 milligrams. So, so you're at a very, very optimal dose, or a very common dose for mitochondrial optimization. What I often will do with people, and the other important thing about methylene blue with dosing is that unless it's an acute issue where you have an acute trauma, acute infection, where you might want to give a high dose very quickly, oftentimes what you want to do is give a lower dose, start off at 4 milligrams or 8 milligrams, and then increase the dose. What I typically recommend as a titration is starting off at 4 milligrams or 8 milligrams, which would be a quarter or a half of the troche.
Quarter of the troche. Yeah.
And then increase the dose every 3 to 5 days until you start feeling the effects that you're hoping to feel, whether it's brain fog getting better, inflammation, pain, mood, all those things, right? And once you find that dose that seems to be working best for you, then that's your dose. That's the dose that you take. Sometimes it's going to be 8, sometimes it's going to be 16, sometimes it'll be 12 or 25, depending on the situation. But usually it's we found between 8 and 16 is a good sweet spot for most people. And then, of course, you can add it to other things like, red light therapy, for example, or getting out in the sunlight, which I know you do, Sarah, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I will take methylene blue on the days where I'm like, it's a nice sunny day out. I'll stack it with sauna, stack it with cold plunge, laying out in the sun. I do all the things, because typically the times I take methylene blue for me is if my kids have kept me up, like it's been a bad night and I have work to do, I have to be productive. Or if I feel like I'm coming down with something, like I've
Sure.
got a cold or just like, oh, I'm dragging and I just need to pull my energy up. Like I
Mhm.
don't take it on like a regular basis. It's more on an as needed basis. Or if I feel like I've just been under a tremendous amount of stress and my body is kind of just dragging,
Mhm.
uh, I'll do it. Or if I'm flying, I'll do it if I'm flying on an airplane. Trying to think of other situations, but yeah,
Yeah.
those are pretty much the big ones for me. Pouring out of sleep, feel like I'm getting sick, traveling on an airplane, life is kicking my butt.
Yeah, and that's a fantastic way to use it. And I think as your mitochondria get more optimized overall, you will probably need it less in just kind of specific situations. And so another one where if you're pretty well optimized that I've seen be very helpful is if you're doing a lot of endurance training, if you're doing a lot of exercise and you're going to be pushing yourself further, you're going to see benefits using Methylene Blue, not only as an endurance enhancer actually, but also as something that can help you with recovery, depending on how you want to use it. Because
Yeah.
what Methylene Blue can do, this actually correlates to your travel as well, is that it can act just like oxygen in your cells. And it can actually help you continue aerobic respiration, or basically continue to make ATP that you would in your mitochondria, even if you don't have as much oxygen around. And that's why
Yep.
it really works with endurance, but it also helps when you travel, because when you travel, you're on an airplane that's at 8,000
Mhm.
feet pressurization. So when you're, people don't realize this, but when you're pressurized on a cabin on an airplane, you're actually at pressurization about 8,000 feet above sea level. And so
Yep.
if you are typically at sea level, which many people are, I'm not, I'm at 16, 70%, 17% here in Colorado, but you're 21%
Colorado.
oxygen at sea level. And so when you get on an airplane, you're at 8,000 feet, you're about 15 to 16% oxygen. So that goes down. It puts a lot of stress on your mitochondria. And so
Yep.
methylene blue can be helpful. You can also just move to Colorado. The jet lag's much better around here because
I'm sure.
I live at 5,500 feet. And so when I go on an airplane, it's at 8,000. So it's much less of a
Not that
delta.
bad.
Yeah, comparatively speaking, right? And so, yeah, you have methylene blue that can be used in the just a performance space, along with the sort of the ad hoc as needed for more stress. You feel like you're getting sick, all the things that you mentioned. But the other piece of this, and as you know, Sarah, is that there's a lot of people out there that are listening that have chronic complex medical illness, or they've been sick for a long time and they have brain fog, and every day is a challenge, or most days are a challenge. And that's where
Hmm.
methylene blue can really shine as well, because you can really start it early on in the process of trying to work on your optimization. Like, go take some of your courses and get outside more. Start changing your diet and doing the things that you talk about all the time. But a good sort of cornerstone habit as exercise would be, like exercise, like you start exercise, everything gets better. Like methylene blue has a similar corollary, because you can start it off with these really low doses, and then your energy gets a little bit better, your capacity to detox gets a little bit better, your brain fog gets a little bit better, and your recovery, so you don't feel like you're debilitated after walking around the block.
Hmm.
Like, these will then
Hmm.
help you do the additional things that you need to do to really start rebooting your health overall. And so I use it a lot that way in clinical practice. I use it as kind of one of the first things I initiate when I'm working with people, to start giving them a little bit of that boost, a little bit of that energy, a little bit of inflammatory support, and then everything else seems to get easier. And then they can start sometimes the harder path of getting really into their diet, really into their lifestyle, and really
Hmm.
trying to change
Yeah.
things from the inside out.
You might have noticed a lot of viral posts about methylene blue lately on the internet, and there's a lot of fear that you could potentially turn your brain blue and cause toxicity issues. But what those articles aren't telling you is that those doses were 100 times higher or more than the standard dose. Now, I have actually been using methylene blue personally and have several clients that also use it. And when I choose my methylene blue, I choose Troches because it is a physician led company. They actually had 4 physicians that have used their real world clinical experience to develop extremely effective health optimization solutions. It's pharmaceutical grade quality because Transcription sources high quality ingredients globally, subjecting each to rigorous testing to ensure unparalleled purity and potency. It's easy to dose. These buccal troches are actually scored, so you can divide them down into a tiny little dose to try it out. I use it for mitochondrial optimization when I've had a night of poor sleep, or if I am flying. If you want to try out the brand that I use and trust, go to troscriptions.com/Sarah K for 10% off of your first order. That's TROSCRIPTIONS.com/Sarah K for 10% off of your first order. Yeah, that's where, people have a hard time changing the diet and those sorts of things because I think they're just really low on energy to begin with. And it's like we're asking them to make such a huge overhaul. That's why I always start with sunlight and really dialing in light and dark cycles and all of those things because that can massively boost your energy. But I see something like Methylene Blue. We were talking about hydrogen before we jumped on here.
Yeah, yeah.
Hydrogen, Methylene Blue, red light therapy, these other things that I think can massively help with it's mitochondrial function. It's all energy. It's all the energy management system of your body. And when that is in the toilet, guess what else is going to be in the toilet? Pretty much every function of your body and whatever you're genetically predisposed to have an issue with first. That's where you're going to see a slowdown, in my opinion.
Yeah, totally. And it's obvious if you just know the biology of it, right? The cellular biology, in the sense that we have a lot of mitochondria. When you and I went when we were in 7th grade, we learned that a cell has a nucleus, it has cytoplasm, it has a mitochondria, and we saw just one mitochondria in that cell that they were showing us. But that is not the case. There are some cells in our body that have thousands of mitochondria per cell, and then we have others that have zero. Actually, there's one cell in our body, the red blood cell, that has no mitochondria. It used to, but then it got rid of it so that it could have more room to carry oxygen. The cells that have the most mitochondria per cell are the ovaries, so the eggs, sperm, the brain, heart, liver, musculoskeletal tissue. And so these are the places that we see the consequences of mitochondrial dysfunction. And so infertility, it's a huge issue, right? And as you well know from your own experience. And then brain fog, concentration problems, cardiac issues, liver issues, detox, exercise-induced fatigue. These are all mitochondrial issues. And so they're everywhere, right? And so and 94% of the US population has some element of mitochondrial dysfunction. It's a huge amount. And there's a lot of different reasons for this. And I know you go through a lot of these things in your own work, but metabolic dysfunction or insulin resistance actually is the number one reason. Number one reason for mitochondrial dysfunction. You have medications that people take, toxins in the environment, stress, sleep, infections, post-infections like mold, COVID, post-COVID, like the list goes on. And so doing the things, and getting up and having the amount of energy to start getting better can be harder. And that's why I really do feel like that Methylene Blue can be one of those things that you can start off very early to help people, along that process.
Yeah, I agree. It's, what people don't understand is that whatever it is, because I get a lot of emails in my inbox of people who are interested in doing courses of mine. And they're like, they give me a list of all the things that they've been dealing with. And I said, this all boils down to your mitochondria. That's it. And I hate to blanket statement or oversimplify because I don't want to discount anybody's experience or say that it doesn't matter, but we still have to do the same thing, really. It may look a little bit different depending on what's going on, but a lot of it is we have to support your mitochondria because that is how your body makes energy, cellular water. It's everything. If that's not there, then guess what? Nothing's going to work. And so we have to look at that. So that's why I like Methylene Blue. I guess the biggest question that I get is who shouldn't take it? Who should be cautious about it? What about people on SSRIs?
SSRIs, yeah.
That's the big one that people talk about a lot.
Yeah, and it's a really good question overall. I mean, the thing about Methylene Blue that's important to know is that it is also what's called a monoamine oxidase inhibitor, which means that it blocks the degradation. So it increases the amount of norepinephrine, dopamine, and serotonin in the brain. So it blocks the degradation of those neurotransmitters. And as a result of that, you will have more of those around. Now, the higher the dose, the more that you're going to block that enzyme. The lower the dose in corollary, you're going to block it less. But it is something that is important to mention and be aware of as you're taking Methylene Blue. So funny corollary to this is there's a doctor named Dr. Paul Saladino, who you probably have seen and know a little bit about. And
I've met him. I know Paul.
So I I do say, what I can say about Paul is that he does practice what he preaches, right? He does the carnivore thing. He lives in the jungle. He does all these things. That's great. But he's not a clinician. Okay, number one.
No,
And so he
no,
doesn't see patients, and he doesn't really know what that means when you're looking at nuances overall. What he
correct.
said in a recent video, and a number of different things that he said that were wrong, but one of them was that everybody was feeling better on Methylene Blue because of the serotonin. He said that because you're taking Methylene Blue, you're going to feel better because you're getting more serotonin. And so this is completely wrong overall. I mean, yes, you're getting a little bit more serotonin, but it's the mitochondrial aspects that are truly, really helping people overall. So just I wanted to put that as a corollary because that was one of those other things that I listened to that. I was like, really, dude? Really? You've never worked with this compound?
Like so many of us have been like, Paul, would you please talk to Scott? Like, people are like, debate Scott. Like, I don't care about a debate. Can we just have a thoughtful conversation? I know, like I've had him on my podcast. I met him in person at White Oak Pastures. Like, really nice guy, honestly.
I'm sure
Do
he
I
is. Yeah. I've
agree
heard,
with a lot of the stuff he says? No, because like you said, he's not a clinician. He doesn't work with people. It's not practical. A lot of the things that he recommends for like people like me, who's a wife and a mother with kids living in a city that has a modern life and a modern like existence, it's not going to relay over. So that's my issue with some of the things that he says, but I really do like Paul. I wish that he would have you on and actually have a thoughtful conversation rather than driving a fear point about this, because I have seen Methylene Blue be helpful for myself. But also, again, speaking as a clinician, it's something I've helped people to implement if they are struggling with fertility, if they're struggling with brain fog, if they're struggling with just low energy, chronic fatigue, autoimmune. Like, we've been able to add that in and make a massive difference for people.
Yeah. And then I think you hit the nail on the head there, Sarah. I think that realistically, people can't live the way Paul does, right? And that's not possible. And that's another big piece that I get onto. It's like another slight side note here, getting back to serotonin and SSRIs in a minute. But the other aspect that I get a lot from a Methylene Blue side as well, it's synthetic. It's not made from the earth, right? And so my corollary or my response to that always is everything that's natural for us good? And I always give the example where I was in medical school and I saw 2 people die foraging for the wrong mushrooms in the forest.
Yeah,
if you eat the wrong mushrooms, you're going to die of liver failure. I saw it. It was not very fun to watch. So not everything that's natural in this world is good for us. And most of us live in a synthetic world. We live with lighting that's not going to be optimized. We live with chemicals and toxins and everything else that's around us. And so sometimes we do need synthetic things within that ecosystem that we live in for the most part, unless you're Paul in the jungle, right? And even him,
barefoot, out on the beach,
exactly.
In the sand, gathering electrons, getting sunlight. Yeah, that'd be great.
Most of us can't do that all the time, right? And so we have to have sometimes, I feel, synthetic things that can really work in a holistic way, in a intentional way, like we're talking about with Methylene Blue. But yes, it is definitely synthetic. It's made in a lab. It was the first drug registered with the FDA back in 1897. And I know we spoke about that on the last podcast too. So I just want to throw that out there, is that not everything synthetic is bad for us. Not everything that's natural that comes from the ground is good for us for the reasons and more that we've just described. But back to the serotonin argument.
Guess what? People driving a car is not natural.
Yeah.
It's not. It's not good for your health. Flying in an airplane, driving in a car, like there's a lot. Yeah, living in these homes with our lights and all the things that we do is not normal. It's not natural. It's not how we were meant to live. So when we're going to be, and that's how I feel like a lot of the work that I do with clients and with people in my community is helping them to unwind from the modern life, living in a high non-native EMF environment, having all these things constantly bombarding our skin, our eyes, our liver, our gut.
Yep.
That's what those of us who are in this holistic space really when we work with clients, that's what we're mainly trying to do, is help them unwind from those things and live more naturally. But there is a time and a place sometimes to bring in synthetic supplements, I believe.
I'm with you on 100%. And I think the key there is to understand that there's a time and a place, right? It's not like you always need to be doing X, Y, Z. It's just, you may need something for a short period of time. You may need less over time. That's what I was describing with Methylene Blue. As your mitochondria get more optimized, you will likely need less methylene blue because you don't need your mitochondria to have that support because you're already supporting it, except when you're traveling, except when you're feeling like something's like you're sick or you got poor sleep or whatever it might be. And then you're using it as needed, right? And so, and that's with a lot of different things. I mean, even with natural compounds, it's the same deal. You don't necessarily need to have,
With adaptogens, I have a cycling process. I never stay on an adaptogen long term. I was just talking with my membership group about this, like, because I use maca, but I'll use 3 weeks on, 1 week off. I'll use ashwagandha, but I'll use it for a bit of time and then I cycle off. I use rhodiola, but I'll use it for a bit of time and cycle off because I don't want my adrenals, I don't want my body dependent upon an adaptogen for it to do what it needs to do. I want to pump the, gas and then pull back, because we're trying to teach the body how to get better at these endogenous functions. And if we are constantly putting ourselves on adaptogens and supplements and we never come off, that's the thing. I think I had another practitioner on a few weeks ago, and he says they come to him and they come to me on a list of 30 supplements they've been on for 3 years. I'm like, why? Why are you, do you even know if you're getting anything from this? And don't go off all your supplements, but sometimes it's good to do a pill stop. Sometimes it's good to take a break. And you don't want your body to be reliant on things.
Yeah, the way I typically delineate it, at least in my clinical practice, is that there's like bioidenticals, which are the ones that we're taking because our body needs X, Y, Z. So for example, like your vitamin B complex, we need these, and we may even need to be taking them on a regular basis because we need to support our B vitamin levels. But these are things you should test over time. But then there are things like adaptogens, or Methylene Blue would even fall into this category, is where it's like, it's not something you should be taking without understanding why you're taking it, and then probably cycling it over time as the system gets more optimized, right? And so I'm with you in that capacity.
Yeah. So I always love the nuanced conversations. That's what my partner, Carrie Bennett, we have another podcast called Quantum Conversations. And we're like, we need to change the title to Nuanced Conversations because it's not going to get the clicks and the views and the likes and the clout or whatever to say, hey, sometimes yes, sometimes no. And I don't have a black and white answer for you.
Right. It doesn't play well on the I totally understand. But that's how life is. That's how people are. And this is the other thing that I get so worked up about is with Paul, and then also this guy, we can go back to Chris Masterjohn at some point soon too. Chris Masterjohn's
I've seen some of his anti-methylene blue stuff too. And I'm
which I want to address in a minute too. Yeah. But his thing is, Chris is a fantastic biochemist. Like hands down, he did a great overview on Methylene Blue about a year ago or so, like the biochemistry. But
I read
his conclusions are wrong. And it's because he doesn't see people for a living. His conclusion was that you shouldn't take Methylene Blue unless you have an inherited mitochondrial disorder, because that's the only way that you really have mitochondrial dysfunction, evidently, in life. No, right? We know that there's a huge spectrum there. But I don't want to forget the SSRI thing, because I didn't answer your question earlier. So let me get back to it, because I'm going to keep going. But so Methylene Blue increases serotonin, increases dopamine, increases norepinephrine. And so if you are on an SSRI or an SNRI, like these newer antidepressants that also block the reuptake of norepinephrine, there is a technical interaction there. That's something that needs to be understood. And then if you are taking these medications, it really is important, if you're going to start taking Methylene Blue, to really work with a healthcare provider to slowly increase your Methylene Blue dose if you choose to do it. What I will say, though, is that I have a number of integrative psychiatrists that I've worked with over the years now that are using our products, using the Methylene Blue in troche format prescriptions, and they're finding that they can wean their patients off the SSRIs and get them on the Methylene Blue instead. And I've had actually just a really interesting story recently. A colleague of mine was working with a widowed gentleman. Maybe I think his spouse died maybe a year before, and since that time, and he wasn't elderly, like super old, but maybe in like his 70s or so. And he was just in the doldrums. He's just kind of still depressed about his wife's passing. She started giving 4 milligrams of Methylene Blue, and the dude just turned around. Like he started getting out of bed more. He started doing housework. It was just a little bit of Methylene Blue, and so that's I think part of that is definitely the serotonin aspect of it, because it's going to increase those neurotransmitters that are going to be helping. So in this particular case, I do think that the neurotransmitter ecosystem changing for this gentleman, and I've seen this across many people actually, is part of the deal. But most of us have underlying mitochondrial dysfunction that's causing our depressive kinds of symptoms, our not wanting to do things, our lack of energy or whatever, right? And so, or our challenges with detox, for example. And so even these lower doses of Methylene Blue, and there's actually been studies on depression in bipolar disorder showing that Methylene Blue at 8 or 16 milligrams can be very, very helpful in these patients overall. And so again, part of that I think is the neurotransmitters, but it's just a part of it because we know that depression and bipolar, you can see massive benefit by just putting these people on things like a ketogenic diet, for example, and not that everybody should go on one. And I know you've had discussions about this in the past.
Yeah, definitely.
The nuance there, but in somebody that has severe mental health disorder or issues, like going keto for a little while can be extremely powerful, for example. And same deal. And why is that? Because they have mitochondrial dysfunction. So it's not an absolute contraindication to take Methylene Blue if you're already on an SSRI, an SNRI, or if you're taking a dopaminergic drug like a Parkinson's medication. I do it in clinical practice.
What about seizure medications?
So it depends on the seizure medication. Some of these, and a lot of these seizure medications are also multi-receptor functioning. So they work on dopamine, serotonin, and norepinephrine together. It's not an absolute contraindication to do it, to have Methylene Blue on board in these patients as well. But the but is that it's really important to work with a clinician because you want to go very slowly with the dosing of Methylene Blue if you're going to do it. And you really want to just make sure that nothing happens that you, I mean, again, so what could happen is the question, right? And so the main thing that's always talked about in overall is that Methylene Blue combined with other serotonergic drugs is going to cause something called serotonin syndrome.
Right.
And serotonin syndrome is extremely rare. If you ask 100 clinicians that are seasoned, if they've ever seen serotonin syndrome, like maybe 2% will actually even raise their hand. It's very, very, very rare. The only study that showed Methylene Blue can cause this is in somebody that was taking a high dose SSRI and they were getting IV, intravenous Methylene Blue. The thing about IV or intravenous Methylene Blue is that it's going to hit the system much faster than, of course, than in your brain compared to taking it orally. Okay. And so a cool corollary to this is that Methylene Blue is almost about 100% bioavailable if you take it orally, whether you put it in the mouth and use it as a troche or if you swallow it. IV is obviously going to be 100% bioavailable, but even orally is extremely bioavailable. And so there's really very few indications really that's required where IV Methylene Blue is required or could be helpful, I think. In general, most people can benefit from the oral Methylene Blue on a basis depending on their needs. But so the only study that showed serotonin syndrome was, or the only couple studies that have shown it, case reports really, has just been IV Methylene Blue with higher doses of SSRIs. So we're using extremely low doses at Transcriptions at my company, and I don't really see that there's a very high risk at all. But if you're taking these meds, it's important to work with a clinician just in case. And one thing that people will say, Sarah, I don't know if people have told you this before, but when I work with people and I start taking Methylene Blue, and they start taking Methylene Blue, is that they'll start feeling when they first start it a little funny, in quotes, like things just feel a little strange. And that could be, and I think it is, that neurotransmitter ecosystem changing a little bit. So that's why I go slow with the dosing. I don't immediately start at very high doses for most people. It usually goes away after the first couple of days of starting the compound, and then they don't have that issue. But there are certain segments of people that will be like, well, I can't take Methylene because it makes me feel kind of funny neurologically. Like I had one lady that told me that it made her feel like she was vulnerable at a bar in college again or something like. And it was really, like very, very specific. And I was like, really, it's super interesting,
Perhaps
right?
Not. Yeah.
But in the end, you can take Methylene Blue if you're on those medications, but just with clinician supervision is my recommendation.
Yeah. And obviously nothing on the podcast is medical advice. This is a conversation, not a consultation.
Of course. Yes. Yeah.
So I wanted to bring Scott here because again, I do see when I work with people benefits and we do low and slow, and I'm always asking questions and monitoring people and then always referring people out to a physician if needed. There are, like you keep mentioning, reasons why someone would want to do this under a physician who understands this compound and how to use it in those situations. rather than willy-nilly just buying it and trying it. The average person like me, who's pretty optimized and again is looking to improve energy, feel better, I feel like I get a metabolic boost from it, honestly.
You do. Yeah, for sure.
I'm so hungry on the days when I do it. I'm like, is this because I had crappy sleep? Or is it because I had Methylene Blue? Because I feel like I'm so much hungrier the days that I take it.
Yes.
We're seeing that a metabolic boost.
Yeah, we're seeing that in like a specific population that has metabolic degradation, I guess is a word, but like that's not the right word. But when you have people that have hypothyroidism, right, when the thyroid's not working well, and they start taking Methylene Blue, they do see a significant improvement in energy overall. And when working to understand how exactly to do this, because this is more on the clinical side, but I've been working with a couple of clinicians looking at how you can titrate down thyroid replacement while you're increasing their Methylene Blue support. Of course, you're doing other things too if you're really doing this holistically. I've spoken before to Isabella Wentz, who you probably know is the thyroid pharmacist, and she's fantastic. And so she uses Methylene Blue a lot. Actually, she uses the Just Blue for energy and for focus, and a lot of the things that you will as well, Sarah, that you mentioned. And so, we don't know about antibody levels. If you have Hashimoto's, for example, we're still working on that, but I'm working with a couple of clinicians to try to understand it. But overall,
that'd be interesting.
It will be. Overall, what I've noticed so far with talking to people, my colleagues, and also a couple of my own patients, is that you seem to be able to ramp down the dosing overall of how much thyroid replacement you're taking because you're increasing metabolic rate. You're increasing the capacity to make more energy. You're increasing your capacity to detox better. And so that's why you're hungry, for example, Sarah, as you described it, when you take it as well. And so, I think the key here, to go back to another point that I didn't finish around this guy, Chris Masterjohn, is that Chris, again, fantastic biochemist, did a great job talking about how Methylene Blue works and how you can compensate for mitochondrial dysfunction. But his final conclusion is that don't take it unless you have mitochondrial dysfunction that's inherited, right? And so, but we now know that.
How much of us don't we inherit our mother's mitochondria? So, how many of us does it have to be clinically diagnosed as dysfunctional, or can we just go by like most people are dysfunctional? I don't understand
so the way he was doing it was very
specific,
book focused. It's like, I'm looking at a book, and a book tells me that you have an inherited mitochondrial disorder. You're obviously going to have mitochondrial dysfunction. And so that's the conclusion that he made. And this is the problem with the nuance of clinical medicine. There's much more of a spectrum of mitochondrial dysfunction out there. And in fact, he just came out with a new paper recently that tried to be one of those clickbait kinds of things in the beginning where he's like, Methylene Blue is not doing X, Y, and Z, but it is helping you with things like travel. So he did admit that if you were going on an airplane and you were hypoxic on a plane or low oxygen compared to where you typically are, that Methylene Blue can do all these things to be very helpful. It can recycle NAD. It can compensate for the potential oxidative stress of being on an airplane with being closer to the sun and the radiation and protect you from the air. And he talked a little bit about that stuff. And so I appreciated it overall. But again, his main way of describing the paper was Methylene Blue is not rebooting or recharging your mitochondria, but it can help you on a plane, right? So, but a lot of people are on a plane physiologically all the time, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, living where I live, it's like non-native EMF everywhere, neighbors everywhere, cars driving by. It's kind of like being in a microwave, honestly. And that's how a lot of people that live in cities, we're exposed to this stuff. There's not really a way to escape it unless we get in our car, which is another microwave, and drive out to a place where maybe there's probably satellites, towers. Like, it's really, really hard to escape from this microwave type environment. I don't think people realize what's going on with the cellular dehydration that we're experiencing. Non-native EMF and blue light actually impact cytochrome 4. Uncoupling vitamin A from the eye, that's an issue as well. And we're all looking at screens and phones and having fluorescent lights, LEDs everywhere. And so we're all experiencing mitochondrial stress all the freaking time, just as a result of our light environment, just as a result of like going outside and having all these frequencies our bodies are not necessarily adapted to handle that are mitochondrial stresses. And so,
so like you talked about with your other podcast, it's a nuanced conversation, but basically all of us are living with native or synthetic stress on our mitochondria on a regular basis. As we get more optimized, we have resilience. We can deal with a little bit of stress. Like that's our body's supposed to do that. We're supposed to have things that stress us, but we have to have the opposite. We have to have things that make us more resilient. We have to have things in our body that make us able to recover better. And so many of us don't have those things anymore. Nope. So when you're talking about using Methylene Blue here for airplane travel, it's very similar, that stress that you're getting on an airplane, to how other people are on a regular basis, right? They have, they're living, even if they're not on altitude, they're not on an airplane and things like that. So
maybe they're in an apartment, a condo in the middle of the city, driving all day for work, going in an office with fluorescent lights, surrounded by Bluetooth everywhere, just so the nature of like going to work. You know, I don't think people realize the stresses that these things put on the body.
Yeah, yeah. And so the other argument that Chris and Paul both made in their, Paul Saladino and Chris Masterjohn made in their papers and videos, is that you shouldn't take Methylene Blue if you have optimized mitochondria, because it may make the mitochondria not work well in some way. And they were quoting a couple papers that were done in stroke literature, actually. And this stroke literature was showing that if you used Methylene Blue at high doses, around between 1 and 2 milligrams in the IV in animals. So again, IV is going to get to the brain much faster overall.
Right.
What they found was that if you had an animal had a stroke, what they were able to do is reverse the damage, not entirely, but significantly mitigate the damage from the stroke if they use these high amounts of Methylene Blue very quickly. And that's a positive, obviously. That's a good thing about Methylene Blue. But they also noticed that in some of the normal tissue that wasn't affected by the stroke, that there was a mild amount of stress on that tissue because of the high doses of Methylene Blue. And so their argument as a corollary to that paper is that, no, if you have normal mitochondria, you shouldn't take it because it's going to cause stress on the system. But remember, this was IV Methylene Blue. This was a high dose of Methylene Blue, and it was being used for a stroke, which was significantly mitigated as a result of taking this high dose of Methylene Blue. So in my clinical practice, I have everybody having their, as I mentioned earlier, the higher doses of Methylene Blue in their medicine cabinet in case something severe happens, where they have severe trauma, severe stress, God forbid a stroke or concussion or something like that. They have the higher doses available to them. I don't use them for long periods of time, but for 3 to 5 days of 150 milligrams of Methylene Blue, I will do that. And I've seen really good benefits from an anti-infective perspective, an anti-inflammatory perspective. But those high doses will probably cause some stress in some people if they're using it for long periods of time, for sure. But maybe even in the short term, giving you more stress in maybe normal areas of your brain. But you're doing it because the risks are lower compared to the potential benefits of getting Methylene Blue in the system at those high doses for short periods of time. So that's the main other argument that they have, is that you shouldn't take it if you have optimized mitochondria, because it's going to make your mitochondria function more poorly or in some way. But really that's because they're quoting studies with very high doses of Methylene Blue overall in the IV that were used in animals for strokes and things like that.
Yeah, I've heard that argument about hydrogen as well. And I'm like, well, it doesn't work that way because it's a selective antioxidant. So, and if you don't have enough ROS in the mitochondria, it can actually signal and help to make more. And if you have too much, it can actually get rid of the excess. So it's I see it as an adaptogen for ROS in the mitochondria. And I think we were talking, because I heard a really popular doctor talking about this last week with hydrogen. So I think he was trying to debunk something that Gary Brecka said, which, I mean, yeah.
Yes, continue.
Like, yeah, I appreciate you for that. But you're kind of incorrect on the mechanism. And I think perfectly healthy people can see great benefits from using hydrogen. Methylene Blue, correct me if I'm wrong, can kind of do similar. So a healthy person, let's talk about that just in terms of like what exactly it does the mitochondria. I know you mentioned supporting cytochrome 1, 2, 3, and 4. Like what are the specifics for my nerdy people who are interested?
Yeah, totally. So it's basically what's called a redox cycler. And I know we dove deeply in the last podcast. You and I did about it. But the idea with that is that it can donate electrons to the electron transport chain of the mitochondria, helping you to make energy from those electrons. And so then it can compensate for areas, maybe your complex 1 or 2 that aren't working as well and aren't recycling their NAD and FAD. So Methylene Blue can recycle those too. It can recycle NAD, it can recycle FAD, so those can go back to the citric acid cycle and pick up more electrons. And so the whole cycle doesn't break down, because if you don't have enough NAD plus or FAD plus, citric acid cycle and your mitochondria is going to break down, and you're not going to be able to make energy, and everything else kind of goes backwards from there. And so Methylene Blue is, I like to think of it actually like an adaptogen, as you just described, from hydrogen. Actually, hydrogen is the only other thing that I know that does this as a single compound. So Methylene Blue does that. It has that donation capacity. It can help with recycling. So it helps, with increasing energy on the electron transport chain. But it can also pick up free electrons as well, or electrons that are required to help maintain the system. So that's when I went to the NAD and the FAD. So what Methylene Blue is doing in that capacity is actually recycling. So it's actually it's taking an electron off NADH and then recycling it to NAD plus. It's taking an electron off of FADH and recycling that to FAD, so they can go back to the citric acid cycle. So not only is it helping with electron donation, but it's also helping with electron receiving. So it's oxidized or reduced. And so not only is it picking up from NADH and FADH, but it's also picking up free radicals or oxidative load, or ROS. And so it can work directly as an antioxidant. Higher doses of Methylene Blue, over about 1 milligram per kilogram, or around that, a little bit lower, a little bit higher for sure. It also increases a pathway called the NRF2 pathway in our body, which increases our glutathione production. And it does that because more Methylene Blue in the system is going to cause an increase in the amount of production of hydrogen peroxide. And so people get scared about hydrogen peroxide because it's something you buy at the local Walgreens or whatever. But hydrogen peroxide is made by our cells for a number of different reasons. But one of the main reasons is as a signaling molecule, and then another is as a antimicrobial. So it's an antiviral, it's an antibacterial. And so, but when there's more hydrogen peroxide around, you have to create more of a antioxidant capacity. And that's why you make more glutathione as well. So, but this is important because if you take really high doses of Methylene Blue out of the gate, you're going to be making more hydrogen peroxide. Does your body have the capacity to neutralize it with glutathione? Do you have enough capacity? And so if you take too much too quickly, this is why people get detox, Herxheimer kinds of reactions, Herxheimer types of reactions, because their body doesn't have the detox capacity. And then, so you have to support that. You give them glutathione.
I'd sit on some molecular hydrogen to do that, because it helps your body make more glutathione.
Exactly. So you give them molecular hydrogen, you give them glutathione, you give them activated charcoal. And so that's why if you're going through more of a detox kind of process, like, you really want to be supported whenever you're doing that, but you don't want to start off typically at a higher dose of Methylene Blue. And this is really important for people that have chronic infections, for example. Like, you want to get to the infection, you want to treat the infection, and high doses of Methylene Blue can do that. And I've seen it be dramatically helpful. But oftentimes, you either have to be really supportive of them right away if you want to use higher doses, like get the glutathione on board, get the activated charcoal on board. But in general, you want to really titrate their dose slowly over time until you get them to a higher anti-infective dose, but you didn't get them all the crappy detox symptoms along the way, that kind of thing.
Right. So don't do it the American way. More is better. Every day is better. That's the thing I come across with people in my private community is they take it every single day. They take high doses. I'm like, no, you're not. That's not how you're supposed to do it.
Right.
I don't recommend anybody take it every single day. Is there a chance it can kind of build up in the body, or what would be some of the risks of taking it every day? Or do you think it's like not an issue?
That's a good question. So if you're taking, we've done the calculations, and if you're taking oral Methylene Blue over about 80 milligrams a day, you will start, and you have normal kidney function, you will start getting it to build up in the system. If you take less than that, it should be out of the system within 24 hours, because the half-life of Methylene Blue is about 4 to 6 hours. Now, saying that, anybody that's taking more than about 30 milligrams as a therapeutic dose, what I typically recommend is taking at least 1 day off per week. And the more you're taking, the more days off per week that you should be taking, is what I think. And so if you're taking 80 or 100 milligrams a day, that can be helpful in some people. You probably want to be taking at least 2 days off per week when you're not taking any methylene blue. If you're taking lower doses, if you're taking 4, 8, 16 milligrams, it's out of your system completely in 24 hours. So it's not going to build up for sure. Whether you should take it every day depends on why you're taking it. If you're taking it because you're working on your mitochondria and you're doing all the things that you're recommending, Sherr, it might be one of those things where you want to take it every day for 3 weeks, a month, longer. But then as you're starting to feel better, you start weaning it down and seeing what's that minimal effective dose and frequency that works best for you. And then oftentimes it's going to be, on average, for a lot of people that I work with, like 3 days a week that you're taking it. You're taking it on days when you have more stress. But on average, I find that when you're more optimized, you're going to be taking about 3 days a week. But when you're less optimized and when you're getting started, you may take it 7 days a week. And that's okay. These low doses are very, very safe. If you have like an autoimmune condition, for example, that may never really completely go away, maybe you need to be on 4 or 8 milligrams a day all the time. And that's totally safe overall. There's really no issues with those kinds of doses over the long term. But again, of course, the goal is to try to wean down over time as much as you can. If you're taking higher doses, definitely taking days off during the week is a good idea. And if you're taking higher doses and you can take longer off, like, and you can more cycle it, that's also possible as well. I've seen that depending on the situation and why people are taking it. But yeah, so there is, I think, a spectrum here. In general, I think most people should not be taking it every day, even at the low doses, unless they need to for medical reasons and as they're doing more of the optimization. But like in my clinical practice, I've kept people on low dose methylene blue for 6 months, a year, longer, depending on the situation, and they do great, overall. So there's a spectrum on how you can think about it.
Yeah. And if anyone's unsure, then I think the most important takeaway is to find a practitioner that can monitor you on this and help guide you through that, like personalize that. They have a full conversation with you. They do an intake of your medical history, other challenges that you have. And really, because I hear a lot of things in a consultation that I wouldn't necessarily like pick up on through an intake form, even like talking with someone. I think that's really, really fully important. If you're going to do this from a level of like therapeutic, I wouldn't necessarily DIY it.
I think it's an important point. Yeah, for sure.
Definitely. And then combining it with things with like red light therapy, sunlight, hydrogen. I even love cold therapy in Methylene Blue now. That's a new thing. I've got my cold plunge out there, but those are things that also support the mitochondria. So I feel like it kind of takes the Methylene Blue to the next level. And there's some interesting research on red light and Methylene Blue, right?
Yes, there is. Yeah, there's definitely a synergy because they both donate electrons to complex 4, the cytochrome oxidase. There's also evidence that both of them can help regenerate and reboot the actual complex itself, the protein complex. So that's an interesting part of it as well. So, and then cold is interesting. There's no studies here, but my sense of what's happening is that when you're squeezing down, when you're getting cold and you're constricting, your mitochondria get more efficient because the proteins are closer together. And so the combination of that with Methylene Blue helping with the efficiency overall, I think is
you don't have
happening.
To travel so far. The electrons can just kind of like come into that tighter chain and
exactly.
you make more energy, more water, more heat. So many good things there. So
exactly. Yeah. So I use it a lot in combination with sauna, with near infrared light specifically, but also getting hot and heat can be helpful. But specifically near infrared heat or light, and then with cold plunge, and then I combine it with exercise, endurance, lots of different types of things to help with, leveraging the capacity that you get with a little bit of extra oxygen or energy capacity, I should say. So.
Right. Yeah. And one more thing I will also say, just to throw in, I only take it in the morning. I don't know if you have like clinical curls around that, but for me, I only take it in the morning because it gives me so much energy that I know if I took it in the evening, there's no way in hell I'd get any sleep. So what do you see around that?
So what I usually recommend is when you start Methylene Blue, even at low dose, you start off in the morning. Start off at 8 o'clock or whenever in the morning. Typically, it's better to be done on an empty stomach if you're going to take it because it's going to work a little bit faster that way. The half-life is 4 to 6 hours. So in some patients and some of the people that I work with, I will recommend they have another dose about 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. There are some people that I work with that can take it before bed and have no problems. In fact, they say they actually sleep better, their HRV's better, and they poop in the morning. That's fantastic. And so that's not for everybody. Most people, I dose it either daily or BID, but the dosing, the twice daily would be 8 a.m. and about 2 p.m. at the latest overall. And then that second dose may be the same dose, it may be less. It just depends on the person and the kind of what they're dealing with. But yeah, so it can be dosed twice daily, but typically it's not that late in the day for most people. Now, it's not technically a stimulant. It doesn't have any stimulants in there, but it just kind of raises your energy capacity. And so you feel more energy, and but you don't feel like you're on a lot of caffeine or something. Something like that. So it's a bit of a different feel. We do have another product that called our Blue Canatine that has caffeine, nicotine, and CBD along with Methylene Blue. And that one's your focus formula. That one's like your Adderall-like, stimulant-like one. And so if you're already very sensitive to the Methylene Blue on its own, then you don't likely need the Blue Canatine. But I love the Blue Canatine. I take a quarter a couple of times a week when I have a lot to do, and it really does, move the needle for me. And I've been able to wean patients off of some of the stimulant pharmaceuticals, actually using it over time, which obviously is a good thing too.
That's a really good thing. Yeah. And one last question that I just thought of. Yeah. I usually swallow my troches because I always have to be on camera. I have to be filming. I have to sometimes go pick up my kids from places, and I don't want to have this Smurf mouth. Yes. I personally find it anecdotally to be just as effective as just putting it in my mouth and letting it sit there and my whole mouth turn blue. From your standpoint, though, is there a disadvantage of me taking it that way, or I have clients that don't want to do the blue mouth thing either, and they do that and still feel great effects. So am I missing out on anything? Should I sometimes allow the troche to sit in my mouth and turn blue, or what do you think on all that?
The major difference is how fast it's going to work. If you dissolve it in the mouth, it's going to be faster. If you swallow it, it's going to be a little bit slower. Now, if you're going to swallow it, as I was alluding to earlier, it's best to do it on an empty stomach. And actually a good little trick there is to eat about 20 or 30 minutes later, because if you are eating in the morning, which I know you're somebody that likes to eat in the morning. So
I do.
I like to eat in the morning too. And so because after you eat, it's going to push things and help digestion and kind of get it to metabolize faster into the system. The major thing I would say here, Sarah, just to be clear, is that there is a patient population, a group of individuals that do better having it dissolve in their mouth instead of swallowing it. And those are people that have more brain fog in general. If they have more brain fog, if they have more concentration issues, because it works faster, they just feel the difference faster. It's still going to work if they swallow it, but it's going to work faster if they dissolve in the mouth. So in that case, if you're having a lot of brain fog and you're listening, if you're having a lot of concentration problems, like difficult for you to really kind of get your brain to do what you want to do, then trialing in the mouth is worth doing. Yes, your mouth is going to turn blue, but if you park it in the back of your mouth, you leave it there, you don't talk while you have it in your mouth. We also have some remedies that we can talk, that are on our website and others. You can use hot liquids after it dissolves. That's going to help. Matcha green tea is actually quite good. Actually, it really does help with the teeth.
To get the blue out. Yeah.
It gets the blue out if you do it. Some baking soda can be helpful. But I would say the majority of people can really just swallow it and get the same mitochondrial benefits. But the great thing about the troche is that it's titratable. So you can start off with a quarter of the troche, take a half or a full, and figure out the right dose for you. I mean, the problem with liquid out there, Sarah, is that liquids are difficult to dose. None of the ones that we tested were meeting label claim, meaning that they were all less potent than they said on the label. And that's because in the water and solution, it deteriorates faster overall. And so you don't know what you're getting exactly. Like, it's difficult from a quality control perspective. Like, there's tons of companies out there now. When we first started, and you and I spoke a couple of years ago, there was like maybe one other company. Now there's like 30 or 40 companies that are making Methylene Blue. So you have to be really careful about the quality. You have to make sure it's not contaminated with heavy metals, which it can be. You have to make sure that they give you their certificate of analysis. But the problem with certificates of analysis is that they're done internally, or like you don't know who did them, and so even if it's USP, so you have to really trust the company. And look, we've been doing this for 5 years. There's 4 docs in the team, including me. I use it myself. I use it with my patients, with my family, and so I trust what we do. And I hope that's at least helpful in the sense of what we do at Transcriptions is, I think, much better than any other company out there. And we've been doing it the longest, and like liquids are just messy. So
Yeah, they are. Talk about staining your mouth and making a mess. That's a quick way to do it. Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
And your
Troche's just
countertops,
easy.
man.
You can cut it up into fourths. And I mean, I take the whole thing, but it's just, for me, it's easier that way.
Yeah.
And I find the Just Blue to be really powerful. I know you guys have clinician strength Methylene Blue that you sell on your website as well. So people actually have to be clinicians to purchase that.
Yes.
But the average everyday person can go through and just get the Just Blue. That's what I recommend people start with. Obviously clinicians would go in and get the more powerful stuff. And maybe we can talk about that if there are any clinicians listening that are interested in taking that a step further.
Yeah. So if you're a clinician that's listening, we have a full practitioner portal with education, webinars, physician desk references. If you're not on there, sorry, we need to get you on there. But all of that is available to practitioners. And then we have a practitioner strength Methylene Blue called Tro Plus Blue. And the Tro Plus is 50 milligrams, 50 milligrams per troche. And so that's a lot higher, obviously. And that's why we made it as a practitioner only strength. The challenge with a lot of liquids out there and everything else is that they're dosed way too high overall. So we feel like those higher doses really should be more on the monitored side if you're going to be taking them for periods of time. And so we do have a practitioner map where we have practitioners that are selling our products around the country that we can plug people in if they're not practitioners. But if you are, head on to our website. It's a simple link. Just click practitioners, sign up, and you get an account with us, and you get wholesale pricing and all the other education as well.
Nice. I'm excited for everyone to hear this episode and to, you and I think we're very respectful of Paul and of Chris Masterjohn.
Yeah,
because I respect their work. I respect both of them. I've never spoken with Chris, but I've always I've followed his work for the last 6 years or so. I think I got into his stuff in 2019, and I think a lot of it's really fantastic. I've met Paul. Think he's a great person. I just think they both happen to be missing the mark on this particular topic, and that's why I wanted to bring you on because
thank you. Yeah,
you are the OG doctor who really understands this and can speak to nuance for people, and I hope that people take that from the conversation.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. I respect those guys a lot too. But everybody always tries to capitalize on trends from the social media perspective too, and they want to get their eyeballs, and I get all that. And so it's the world we live in. I appreciate their work, but I also appreciate coming on here, Sarah, and being able to talk about some of the myths and some of the misinformation, if we want to use that word. And there is nuance here, but I do feel like many people can benefit from getting clean sourced. Our company Transcriptions is great for this. Methylene Blue to really try and see how it can integrate into what's going on with them and see how it can help.
Absolutely. Well, I'll obviously have links down in the show notes for everyone. I'm pretty sure my discount code over there is Sarah, just one word. And where can people find you? I know you've got a podcast. You have a whole bunch of stuff that you do, interviewing really great people.
We do. Yeah, we need to get you on. Yeah.
I would love
so it's
that.
It's called the Smarter Not Harder podcast. And we mostly interview clinicians and people that are in clinical practice, also Nobel laureates and, crazy scientific people. But the main way we do it is clinical work, right? Because my goal, if there is a goal with the podcast, is to bring clinical information out there for other clinicians. But these are people that see patients for a living. These are patients that are doing the work and can understand the nuance more than others can sometimes. So the Smarter Harder podcast, you can find us there. We have roving hosts. I'm often one of the hosts. I am the host most of the time. And then we also have Transcriptions is the name of the company. Transcriptions.com is the website. @Transcriptions is the Instagram handle. My own personal Instagram is @Dr. Scott Sherr, DrScottsherr, where I post a lot about transcriptions, but I also post a lot about health and wellness in general and the work that I do otherwise. I think those are the main places people can find me. So,
yeah. And I just think you're a great guy. 4 kids, hardworking, see patients. It just can't say enough nice things about you. So highly recommend people check your stuff out, your podcast. I love Transcriptions. And it's been a blast talking with you today. Thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure. Until next time.
Thank you so much for listening to the Evolving Wellness podcast. Just a quick little reminder, this is not medical advice nor meant to be taken as a substitute for working one-on-one with a healthcare practitioner. And if you enjoy the show, please head on over to Apple or Spotify to leave the show up to a 5-star review. If you're over on YouTube, please leave us a like, leave us a comment. I really appreciate you for being here, for listening to the show, and your support means the world to me as I continue to try to pull guests from around the world to bring you informative content to empower you to make decisions about your own health. Thank you so much for being here, and I look forward to seeing you again next week.